There are over 35,000 museums within the United States, welcoming over 850 million visitors each year. Did you ever wonder what goes on behind the scenes in museums, creating the displays and exhibits we all enjoy? Join us as we explore museums and their exhibits from the inside out. Hi, I'm Leslie Mueller. Welcome to Museum Access, the show that takes you behind the scenes at America's top museums. We're in Langley, Virginia, home to the Central Intelligence Agency. Today we have a special treat for you, the private museum within CIA headquarters that is off limits to the public. The CIA is responsible for providing national security intelligence to senior policymakers. Yep, that means the President of the United States gets a daily briefing report from the CIA. When a problem or issue of national security is identified, the CIA begins the complex process of collecting information about the issue. They have to figure out what is happening, why it's happening, what might happen next, and analyze what it means for the United States. The agency is divided into 5 basic areas: operations, analysis, science and technology, support, and digital innovation. They are all part of the intelligence cycle that is ongoing 24/7 worldwide. Today we'll learn about the process of intelligence gathering, from outer space to deep in the ocean, and we'll hear about a few of the more surprising shining stars of the intelligence community. So are you ready to explore the behind the scenes at the Central Intelligence Agency? Let's go. So let's start with the history of the CIA. Was it always called the CIA?
Well, the history of the CIA starts with its World War II predecessor, the Office of Strategic Services. This is Roosevelt's wartime intelligence agency that was created in 1941 and then reorganized in 42 after Pearl Harbor, and operated in 3 conflict zones: in North Africa, Europe, and in Asia. The FBI had the brief to collect foreign intelligence in the Western Hemisphere, and that was OSS's mission, which was to collect foreign intelligence in those conflict zones, to take that raw intelligence and turn it into informative analytical products, to develop gadgets to help OSS officers and their agents collect, conceal, communicate intelligence.
And we're going to see some of those
We
later,
are going
I guess.
to see some of those and their CIA descendants. And of course, we're doing covert action during World War II, as well as counterintelligence. So all the core missions that CIA has today were established during the war. And then in 1947, CIA was created with the National Security Agency. Donovan had lobbied for a post-war intelligence agency at the end of the war. And when the Army intelligence, Navy intelligence, and State Department couldn't agree on how it would look, he created an entity called Central Intelligence Group in 1946 and asked for a daily summary to organize the chaos in his intelligence inbox.
The beginning of briefings.
The beginning of that briefing we know as the President's Daily Briefing today. So I think we can say that had Donovan not accomplished what he did in 3.5 short years during World War II, it's unlikely President Truman could have set up the CIA in 1947, just a short 2 years later. And then in 1949, the Soviets have the atomic bomb.
Now, I'm going to ask a very basic question here, but everybody throws around the term spy. What exactly does that mean?
What we do is recruit spies who have access to the kind of information that we need to collect in support of national security directives. So our mission is to be our nation's first line of defense, to collect intelligence that matters, to provide all source strategic intelligence analysis of that raw intelligence, to put it into informative documents to help the policymakers downtown make decisions about our national security. The work that we do, that our spies help us collect, and our technologies help us collect, give the president, those things give the president the time to make a decision and the space to take the action. That's a very simple definition of intelligence. We're a foreign intelligence agency. We operate around the world from the highest heights to the deepest depths. And we're going to take a look at that.
We'll see examples of that. So
Yes,
I think it's time to move on and see some of the technology that's been used.
Let's do it.
Women have made a significant contribution to the CIA mission throughout its history. One of the more dramatic examples is the career of Virginia Hall. Born in Maryland in 1908, Virginia was an adventurous young woman. She became a clerk at the U.S. Embassy in Warsaw, then on to Turkey, where she suffered a serious hunting accident and lost her left leg below the knee. She then went to work in the Venice consulate, fitted with her new wooden leg. The outbreak of World War II found Virginia in France, working with British special operations, helping the French resistance. When the Germans seized all of France, she barely escaped to Spain by walking across the snow-capped Pyrenees. In 1944, she joined the U.S. Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, predecessor of the CIA, and returned to France. She organized sabotage operations, supported resistance groups as a radio operator and courier, mapped drop zones, and helped sabotage military movement. For her work in France, OSS Chief General William Donovan personally awarded her the Distinguished Service Cross, the only one awarded to a civilian woman in World War II. So, Tony, the Central Intelligence Agency, I know, is from the highest heights to the deepest depths. Let's start in space.
Since man's origins, he's always wanted to climb a tree, to spy on the neighbors next door,
Sure.
to get higher and higher and higher. And so the technical programs like the U-2, the A-12, helped us do that during the Cold War. But we got all the way to space in the Cold War as well, because it was only going to be a matter of time before the U-2 was shot down. We're going to talk a little bit more about the U-2. It did its first operational flight over the Soviet Union on the 4th of July, 1956.
Perfect.
But the Soviets had picked up that overflight on radar that the United States had sold to them during World War II under the Lend-Lease program. So the A-12 Oxcart comes along to fly at 90,000 feet, but it has its own vulnerabilities as well, although it was never shot down. Man is going to want to get as high as he possibly can, and you might recall that Francis Gary Powers was shot down his U-2 over Sverdlovsk on the 1st of May, 1960. Within 3 months, Corona, the first photo reconnaissance satellite, flew its first mission from space. And that first mission photographed more of the Soviet Union than all the U-2 flights combined to that date.
Oh my God.
So it's a huge leap forward in technology.
Sure. Tell me what we're looking at behind us here.
So the early A-12 pilots used this kind of a suit for training. So this full pressure suit dates from 1960, and they were custom made. This one was custom made for Colonel Ken Collins, who flew both the A-12 and the SR-71. He flew both programs. Eventually, when they went operational, the suits were silver and then white to help deflect the heat in the cockpit.
Sure, yeah, dark color like that.
Because the windows up in the cockpit could reach inside 400 degrees Fahrenheit. So some of the pilots would heat their meals ready to eat up on the
in their foil packets?
up on the window, of the
That's
aircraft before consuming it. So these training suits are fairly rare. We're very lucky to have one from the David Clark Corset and Brassiere Manufacturing Company.
Oh, lovely.
They made our pressure suits. David Clark did. In the world of espionage, there's no such thing as technology that's too old for operations. We revisit technologies all the time. And in the early 70s, C.I.A. needed low-level imagery over a hard target area Pigeon missions are still classified. And we developed
Pigeon missions.
They are still classified,
Be called,
yes.
okay.
So pigeons have been around for centuries as a partner in espionage. They flew microfiche into Paris during the Franco-Prussian War. The Germans invented the pigeon camera in 1901. Pigeon photography was used during World War I.
Huh.
So we developed a program. However, our smallest camera weighed 90 grams, and that was too heavy for a pigeon to carry. We needed a 40-gram camera. Then we had to train our birds. Where do you go for a pigeon trainer? We went to Hollywood, and we hired the bird trainer
Of course.
who had trained Fred the cockatoo on the old Beretta cop show back in the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
And we found in working with pigeons they're a challenge. As soon as you strap a camera on a pigeon and make that pigeon operational, to the civilian pigeons, they don't look the same anymore. So the civilians...
Wait, to the civilian pigeons.
To the
yeah.
civilian
So they're
pigeons.
alienated within their...
Right, so they've got this unusual profile that in their little bird brains doesn't quite translate into friendly pigeon, looks like enemy pigeon maybe. So the operational birds would be attacked by the non-operational birds. Plus a hawk likes a tasty morsel of pigeon every now and then. We had one operational loss to a hawk. Plus pigeons are very sensitive to their environment, oddly enough. They don't like change, and when it came time to ship them out to the hard target area, they got so stressed out that they molted. And of course, birds without feathers don't fly. So just some of the challenges.
And that camera is pretty exposed with no feathers. Early drone development by C.I.A.'s Office of Research and Development took place in the 1970s. A micro unmanned aerial vehicle, or UAV, was the first flight of an insect-sized vehicle. It was intended to prove the concept of miniaturized platforms for intelligence collection. The Insectothopter had a miniature engine that moved the wings up and down. A small amount of gas was used to drive the engine, and the excess was vented out the rear for extra thrust. The flight tests were impressive, but unfortunately, control in any kind of crosswind proved too difficult.
So if we need to communicate to one another, case officer to agent, the most dangerous time, the most delicate time for us to do that is going to be in a person-to-person meeting. If something goes wrong, then we're both compromised. So part of the tradecraft of espionage is to develop impersonal means of communications. We might use codes or secret writing or one-time pads. And we're going to use signals and dead drops. And a dead drop is simply a concealment. Anything can be a dead drop. But it has to be so dead as to not be noticed, like a hollow bolt on a wooden bridge, or so disgusting nobody's going to want to go near it, like a nasty Moscow rat. So the rat concealment was used in Moscow in the Cold War. The only creature that we discovered would go anywhere near a nasty Moscow rat was a hungry Moscow cat, but our engineers anticipated that as well. So in the kit that you received as a case officer to present to your agent, there was a bottle of hot sauce. And so the agent might lace the rat with hot sauce, and if it wasn't a cat from New Mexico like me, maybe the hot sauce would keep the cat away.
Deter it.
Exactly.
We know what's happening on land. What's happening at water level, Tony?
So within the Directorate of Science and Technology, we have some of the most creative minds in the organization. And in 1999, they came up with a unique solution to do water sampling.
Wait, why do you need water sampling at all?
Remember that everything we're doing has a mission to collect intelligence. So these units, which look like big catfish, can be controlled by a wireless handset by line of sight, and with their robotic tails swim towards the target, which might be a factory that's manufacturing chemical or biological weapons. And that water sampling unit, that UUV, unmanned underwater vehicle, could sample the effluents from that factory and perhaps tell us what's being fabricated there. And it's amazing how lifelike it is. The robotics were state-of-the-art at the time. The only thing we failed to do was give it the ability to spit a hook. Somebody overlooked that little piece there.
I love that. So Tony, where are we here? This looks very interesting, but I'm sure it's a result of years of intelligence collection.
Actually 9 years, 7 months, and 20 days. So after 9/11, this agency worked around the clock to continue to protect the nation using all source intelligence that we've talked about, spy satellites in space, tactical overhead reconnaissance, all that human-enabled technical intelligence, in addition to collecting intelligence on Earth from our assets, our agents. And that intelligence work led us to believe that bin Laden was hiding in a compound in Abbottabad. And our model makers used that intelligence to make a 7-to-1 scale model of the compound, and then the very same intelligence that was used to make this as accurate as possible was used to build a full-scale mock-up of the entire compound at one of C.I.A.'s covert sites. And it was on that mock-up that the assault team came in to actually practice for the raid.
So a covert site, obviously off campus here.
Yes. So the model shop, which is located here at C.I.A. headquarters, made 3 models. The original model was used to brief President Obama and used by the assault team to plan for the raid. And at the same time they made that original, they made 2 exact copies for the historical record, one for C.I.A. Museum and one for the Military Museum. So on the 29th of April, 2011, President Obama authorized this operation under Title 50 authorities. Those are CIA authorities, and a mission that we have had since 1948. Director Panetta is in command of the operation, but he has passed command of the assault team over to Admiral McCraven and to our special ops teams. The first helicopter came in to drop its team right here on the X. And we all remember that that helicopter crashed, and I've always wondered why it crashed. And we were able to interview one of the assaulters on that helicopter, and he explained it very succinctly. He said the 4 H's: height, heat, humidity, heavy. Abbottabad is about 4,000 feet in altitude, and it was an unseasonably warm evening that night. And it's harder for the helicopters to fly through that thicker, warmer air. And there are a lot of assaulters and a lot of equipment. So what happened was that the compound was actually about 15 degrees warmer than anticipated, and the warmer air was rising. As he hauled into a hover here and the rotors were churning, that was forcing the rotor wash down into the compound, and the 2 air masses hit one another and then bounced immediately up over the helicopter. So now he's caught in his own vortex.
It's like enveloped it.
It did. And he knows in that situation, if he tries to add power to lift up out of it, he'll actually settle with power. He's in an American helicopter. Our helicopters rotate counterclockwise, so the rotors are going to have a tendency to pull him that way. And we all remember seeing the helicopter crashed inside this compound with a tail boom over the fence, and they hit very hard.
Oh, so it wasn't actually here, it was over here.
No, it was over here.
I see. Okay, the entry was here.
The assault team, within about 5 seconds, recovered, deployed off the helicopter. The second helicopter was supposed to drop the team on the villa to assault from the top down, and when they saw their sister helicopter go down, they went to Plan B, which was to set down over here. This team deployed, the helicopter left the X, and went and waited behind a mountain until it was needed to come back in. The plan was to assault through this door right here, but it was a false door. So they're in radio contact, and this team says, come down here and we'll enable your entry down here. So a breaching charge was put on this doorway here. This one was open. The team assaulted in 2 different directions within 8 minutes of arriving on the X.
And is this on the property back here?
This is just outside
the compound. I see. Okay.
So within 8 minutes, with all of that, within 8 minutes of arriving on the X, bin Laden was dead. And recovered from next to him on the 3rd floor by the assault team was this rifle. To us, this artifact represents a president authorizing us to do everything within our authorities to bring down Al-Qaeda. This is our intelligence art gallery. We've talked about collecting intelligence from the highest heights to the deepest depths. And we have artifacts related to those stories, but we don't always have artifacts related to the kind of history we need to make sure remains accessible to the workforce.
This is a beautiful painting. Tell me about this.
So this painting captures an operation back in 1974, but we have to go further back in our history to tee this one up, and that's in 1968 when the Soviets lose a Gulf II class state-of-the-art submarine. The K-129 sinks in almost 17,000 feet of ocean, some 1,500 miles off the coast of Hawaii, and the Soviets try for several months to find their sub. They can't, but the US government does. And then one of the most complex technical operations of the Cold War is launched to go get it. This submarine has 3 nuclear missiles on board and 2 nuclear torpedoes. This agency wants that intelligence. Billionaire Howard Hughes will provide the cover. He will help build the Hughes Glomar Explorer, which is a massive ship rigged with heavy lift technology, and that's the cover. Using the heavy lift technology aboard the Glomar, we're going to be mining manganese nodules down on the ocean floor. So the painting takes us to the summer of 1974. The Glomar has taken up her position over her prize. And over the next 45 days, a crew of 176 works around the clock, hauling huge 60-foot sections of this marine riser up into the big lift system to gradually assemble a pipe stem that will weigh 8 million pounds. At the end of that pipe stem is a big claw. And the crew has nicknamed the claw Clementine because her father was a miner 49er, and she's going to be mining manganese down on the ocean floor. She's been hidden in a moon pool underneath the ship. She weighs 4 million pounds, and the target piece we're after weighs another 4 million pounds. So there will be 16 million pounds hanging off this ship in 15 to 50-foot oceans, so the ship cannot rise and fall with the ocean swell. Just to try to put this into context, have you been to the top of the Empire State Building?
Yes.
So go there now, go all the way to the top, walk to the edge, and look down at the street.
Down.
And that's your target. It's an SUV packed to the brim with heavy gold bullion, and you have to pick it up with a claw attached to a piece of spaghetti and not get caught by the Soviets.
Ay, ay, ay.
But it's not one Empire State buildings, it's 12 and a half Empire State Buildings deep.
Oh my God.
So that gives you the scale. So that fateful day in 1974, Clementine seizes her prize and starts back up. 41% of the lift is complete when disaster strikes. A couple of the ribs encompassing the sub fatigue, perhaps because of exposure to nuclear radiation, one theory. They fatigue, open up, that causes the target piece to break, and it tumbles down, part of that tumbles down to the dark depths. We do retrieve a piece of it. We've never declassified how much. So when the artist asked me how big he should make the piece that we recovered, I said, you know, if you just surprise us, we'll be real happy with that. But aboard that piece were the remains of 6 Soviet submariners. We buried them with honors at sea and filmed the burial. And in 1992, when Director Gates went to Moscow for the first time, he presented President Boris Yeltsin a copy of that film and said, Mr. President, it's great to see Moscow from the ground.
Oleg Pekovsky, codenamed Hero, was a Soviet military intelligence colonel during the late 1950s and early 1960s. In 1962, the Soviet Union deployed nuclear missiles to Cuba. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, he provided the Kennedy administration with technical insights about the Soviet missiles, giving the opportunity to negotiate a diplomatic solution, thus altering the course of the Cold War. Adolf Tokachev, a Soviet electronics engineer, worked as a valuable CIA asset for 7 years, from 1978 to 1985. The United States Air Force estimated that his intelligence saved roughly $2 billion in research and development in just his first 2 years of assistance. He was captured and executed in Moscow for high treason in 1986. Tony, let's talk a little bit about the technology that has been based here at the CIA that we use every day.
That's a great story, actually. A lot of our technologies obviously have an operational requirement. You know, they aren't art for art's sake. But when those technologies that were created for operational purposes cross over to improve people's lives.
Sure.
I think those are really interesting stories. So, for example, we need long-lasting batteries, not only for spy satellites in space, but for technical collection devices on land. You want to have a long-lasting battery that doesn't require you to service the listening post every week, say. So we need long-lasting batteries. And we developed one in the late 60s based on lithium iodine, but its optimum temperature for functioning was 97 degrees Fahrenheit. Not enough of an operational range for us. We kicked that technology out to the medical world, and that battery became the battery of choice for pacemakers. Our imagery analysts developed a special software that could track changes in topography over time. We shared that with the medical world. That software helped improve mammograms, tracking changes in topography over time.
Wow.
The police identikit we developed. Google Earth came out of a venture capital entity called In-Q-Tel. It was known as Keyhole before it was Google Earth, but that was developed by In-Q-Tel, which is a part of C.I.A. And
cell phones have to be in there somewhere.
I suspect some of the miniaturization
Sure.
and that sort of thing is in there. And then one of my particular favorites is a lot of work was done over the years to help keep our officers safe in operational situations by disguises. And we certainly reached out to Hollywood. We worked with John Chambers, who developed the makeup for Planet of the Apes. And one of our specialists, when he retired, set up a company to do where he had been protecting people's identity. Now he gave people back their identity by creating prostheses for burn victims. It's extraordinary work,
wow.
really.
That's amazing. And so we take all of this for granted, and yet it all started here.
I think we would be surprised by how much that surrounds us had an operational requirement to begin with, but it's something we take for granted every day now because we use our cell phone or we use Google Earth.
Sure. Well, thank you so much. This has been incredible.
It's been delightful. Thank you for the opportunity.
It's comforting to know that from outer space to 16,000 feet below the ocean's surface, and everywhere in between, the Central Intelligence Agency is working to accomplish its mission of preserving the national security of the United States every day. I hope you enjoyed today's visit to a very private museum. Thanks for joining us on Museum Access. I'm Leslie Mueller. See you next time.